So again, good afternoon to everyone. Thank you for being with us. We'll start the program in about 4 minutes. Now we'll just wait for the other students to join us. In the meantime, some announcements. So for our students, please make sure that you register at the tables near the entrance, and also to log out before you leave the venue or the program, whether you finish it whether you finish the program or you have to leave earlier. No? So please make sure that you get to log out. Second is we have merienda available for everyone. So you may eat for the next 3 more minutes, all right? But then we'll resume the salo-salo after the program, okay? And then also we'll be recording the program, and so we hope that's okay with everyone. All right, we have our documenters here both for photo and video. So thank you. We'll start the program in 2 minutes. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to OSCI at 50, Remembering the Past, Reimagining the Future. It's a celebration of the 50th year of OSCI. So palakpakan naman po natin ang ating OSCI. My name is Chris Castillo. I'm from Student Affairs and Services of the Higher Ed Undergraduate Education Subcluster. And I'm happy to do this for and with OSCI as they journey with and for you. So we'll get to hear a lot about how OSCI came to be, all the 50 years that they've been journeying with us. Right? But to start the program, you may remain seated, but I'd like to call on one of the OSCI formators from the Punla program. We have Mr. Kiko Aureliano to lead us in prayer. Please remain seated.
Spend a few moments of silence. For those who are comfortable doing their sign of faith, you may join me as I say, in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Not that I have already obtained all this, or have already arrived at my goal, but I press on to take hold of that for which Christ Jesus took hold of me. Brothers and sisters, I do not consider myself yet to have taken hold of it. But one thing I do, forgetting what is behind and straining toward what is ahead. I press on toward the goal to win the prize for which God has called me heavenward in Christ Jesus. Dearest Lord, we thank you for today, for this gathering of the Ateneo community, both past and present, and future of it. We thank you for the gift of our partners, who are at the very center of all our programs and efforts. We thank you for the gift of your heart living in all of us. We will protect it in every way we can. We thank you for the gift of Father Ben and everyone who continues to believe in the mission of OSCI in the greater context of the whole Ateneo. As we look back 50 years ago together and continue to chart our path, we ask for your grace to have the fortitude to carry your love into everything that we do next. May your example continue to form all of us as we seek to do the same for all our students, all our partners, and each other. You are, after all, the very first formator that guides us all. Saint Ignatius of Loyola, pray for us. In the name of the Father, of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kiko Aureliano. So again, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you. Thank you very much for joining us this afternoon for this celebration, this simple yet for sure meaningful celebration as we look back on what OSCI was, how OSCI has transformed perhaps over the past 5 decades, where OSCI is now, and where it's bound to go. You know? So as we proceed for the next hour and a half, as a few reminders, so first is we are recording this session and we hope that's okay. It's purely for documentation purposes. Second is while we have merienda available for everyone, we'll resume the salo-salo after our program, okay? And again, for the students who are here, especially if it's part of your class requirements, please make sure that you get to sign in and out before you leave, okay? So to officially welcome all our guests, right, I'd like to call on the Director of the Office for Social Concern and Involvement, all right? She's a batchmate of mine, all right? We're pretty young, no? We're pretty young. I remember OSCI to be a small room at the basement of then Colayco building. Colayco was not just a pavilion, then it was a building, and they were in that corner, no? But even before that, OSCI was elsewhere, no? But during our time, that's where OSCI was, and I'm really happy that our current director is where she is, leading you, forming us, no? So ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Ms. Ophalie Alzona Pornella.
Thanks, Chris. Chris is much older, by the way, but he is a batchmate. Thank you. Anyway, good afternoon to our guests, Father Ben, Doc Shaw, Hila, Kat, of course, Sir Benji, Sir Leland is on his way, I think, no? Ma'am Joy, colleagues, faculty, friends, guests, students. Good afternoon, everyone. It is with great joy and a profound sense of gratitude that I stand here today to welcome you to this event to celebrate a milestone, the 50th anniversary of the Office for Social Concern and Involvement, or OSCI. Hindi ko po siya kasing tanda, by the way. So, may ilan lang po akong kasamahan na kasing tanda ng OSCI. Pero hindi ko na po papangalanan. So anyway, 50 years ago, OSCI was established to respond to the call of the times, the injustices and inequalities in the 70s, and the questions raised on the relevance of schools and universities as institutions serving only the elite. As a concrete response to the aforementioned, OSCI was established and began to coordinate student outreach and one-week and summer immersion programs in rural communities starting April 1975. I remember reading in some documents, so I've been reading a lot of documents now, thanks to Sir Benji and some other friends and other colleagues, that regular visits and service activities to labor unions and urban poor communities were designed for student volunteers and incorporated in the activities of different student organizations. Over time, OSCI also helped in designing courses such as Theo 141, or Theology of Liberation, and ECHO 177, or Theory and Practice of Social Development. Since then, OSCI has also broadened and systematized its programs and activities to reach the other year levels in the college. A lot of things have changed over the last 5 decades, but I won't get into much detail as more will be discussed by our main resource speaker. I will say, though, that through the years, OSCI has remained steadfast in its commitment to make a meaningful impact in society by forming students to become persons for and with others and fostering solidarity action and advocacy work. So to kick off OSCI's 50th year and birth month, we have requested Father Ben Nebres, who was instrumental in establishing OSCI during his time as Dean of the Ateneo College of Arts and Sciences, to talk about why and how OSCI was established, the context at that time, some of his insights, the impact of OSCI, and the continuing challenges for the office and Ateneo today. We have also invited members of our Ateneo community, Dr. Norman Dennis Shaw Marquez, Ms. Helena Roxanne Indigne, and Ms. Jeanne Lovelle Sañarez to serve as reactors from their respective experiences as people working in various spaces of social formation and community engagement. Now, I have the privilege and honor of introducing our main resource speaker. For transparency purposes, a portion of this introduction I got from Dr. Benji Tolosa's write-up last September 2024. Thank you, Sir Benji. He just found out, I think, kanina, no? So anyway, our speaker is a Filipino scientist and professor of mathematics. In 2011, he was named National Scientist of the Philippines for his contributions in the fields of STEM, education, and development. He's the former president of the Ateneo de Manila and Xavier University Ateneo de Cagayan, and former provincial superior of the Philippine Jesuits. As a true man for others, he remains committed to the Jesuit mission of responding to the needs of the poor through his engagements in various programs to help defeat poverty in the country. At present, he serves as a trustee of Gawad Kalinga and continues to help build homes and communities. He has also been helping improve public education in over 400 public schools with the Ateneo Center for Educational Development, or ACE, and in over 300 municipalities, particularly in BARM with Synergia Foundation. He also continues to support young individuals who are engaged in social enterprises for poor communities. Friends, colleagues, guests, without further ado, let's welcome Father Bienvenido Nebres from the Society of Jesus.
Thank you very much, Afari. Because, excuse me, I'd like to record. So good afternoon to all of you. We'd like to greet our reactors, Dr. Shio, Hila, Kat. Would like also to thank Dr. Benji for being here, and really thank Ofali and the leaders and staff of, we used to call it OSCI, you call it OSCI now, but so I might just shift between the two. So I'm very happy to give this presentation of the origins, partly to talk about OSCI, but also to talk about the context and how it was a response to the context of the times, and maybe to invite you to reflect on the times that we live in now and what should be our response to the times in which we live. That's a very different time. So. The 1970s, I think if you attended my talk on the 50 years of my address to the faculty of School of Arts and Sciences, Ateneo in the service of the nation, that was the same context as OSCI. It was a time of social ferment. Sorry. Sorry. So I often already explained that I'm being asked to why and how OSCI was established, the context of the times, and then insights, and then impact and continuing challenges. And I hope that we can talk about this, because this is your time. This was 50 years ago for me. So the 1970s were at a time of social ferment, really social ferment, all over the world, not just in the Philippines. There were worldwide student revolts. There was a famous student revolt, Red Rudy in Paris. I was in graduate school at that time in the United States, and all kinds of demonstrations were happening against the Vietnam War, against imperialism, against what they called the military-industrial complex. On the campuses in the university, including where I was at Stanford, the students would take over buildings, maybe have teach-ins at night, read letters of solidarity from the Vietnamese, and so on. So it was a time of a lot of student revolt. And that affected the Philippines as well. The students at that time would carry, sorry, what happened? Would carry images of Che Guevara. He was a big hero at that time. I don't know, you probably don't know him. Mao Zedong and Ho Chi Minh. That was that time, student revolts. And there was a lot of questioning about the role of universities. They were seen as simply part of the military-industrial complex, perpetuating inequality and perpetuating oppression. Philippines as well. In fact, the justices are affected. In fact, in Mexico, the Mexican Jesuits closed the equivalent of Ateneo de Manila, their premier school, because it was seen simply as as a tool of imperialism. In the Philippines, the Belgian sisters, my sister's congregation, closed their main college in San Marcelino. So that was that time, a very, very radical time. Internationally, the 1971, there's a synod of bishops who came out with an encyclical called Justice in the World. And it really talked to richer nations and say that you must share your wealth. And here in the Philippines, we the Jesuits, we had a meeting in 1973. It was a whole month. I had just taken over as dean, but I spent the whole month of April in Baguio, where we met to discuss what should be our response to that. And Father de la Costa wrote the response, and he said the Philippines is a third world country. The main injustice is the concentration of wealth, power, and quality education in a few, and poverty and poor education among the many. And he said that our mission should really be to respond to this inequality and respond to the needs of the majority poor. That was the context of that time. And the students, 1968, they came out with a manifesto, Down from the Hill manifesto. I don't know if you ever heard about it. The Down from the Hill manifesto was very strong. It said, we find the Ateneo today irrelevant to the Philippine situation because it can do no more than service the power elite. The Ateneo, like the church and the Jesuits province, must identify with the oppressed masses. So that was the whole context of that time. So what was the call of the times? The call of the times was really to ask the church, Jesuits, the Ateneo, to look at the situation that we are living in, and to address what we called, there was a lot of talk at that time about what is the central injustice in the country and the world. And the central injustice was the concentration of wealth, power, quality education in a few, and poverty, and injustice, and poor education among the many. We'll ask you later on whether things have changed. And so we were asked to respond. There were many responses. The speech that I gave to the faculty, we talked about some time ago, Ateneo in the service of the nation, was one response, trying to define what should be the role of faculty in the Ateneo de Manila at that time. This was more a response about students. Mainly students and faculty as well. What should be our response? And OSCI was a response. So to the question of why it was established, it was to respond to the call of the times. And at the end, we'll ask you, what do you think is the call of the times? The next question you ask is how? How did we do things? We were very much inspired by student response to the floods of 1972. In 1972, beginning around the end of May until the end of July, for 2 months, we never saw the sun. Massive it rained and rained and rained. There were massive floods, and Central Luzon was totally flooded. I remember having to go to Singapore at that time, and coming back, all you could see was water. Everything was just water. And Operacion Tulong came out. the students responded, Operation Tulong. The president then, Father Joe Cruz, was very supportive and helped them. And so for that whole month of July, mainly, Ateneo students were going regularly to Central Luzon to deliver relief goods. But the big thing was that there was a group of those students who decided, who realized that bringing relief was not enough. After they're given relief, the farms were still flooded. They still had to be able to farm again. They needed to restart. They needed rehabilitation. And so a group, I don't remember, maybe 30 students or 40, decided to go on to rehabilitation and go there every weekend. They were very visible on campus because they kind of wore a uniform of white T-shirts and maong pants, and you'd see them disappear on a Friday and come back on Sunday. And their presence was very much felt in the Ateneo. Ateneo College at the time was not very big, and so we pretty much knew everybody, and so they were very visible, and they really kind of explained to the whole community that the farmers in Central Luzon are still suffering. So, So sa Relic, how was the student movement that continued to rehabilitation, going every weekend and with uniform? And then there's a book that you should try to get to know called Ateneo in the First 10 Years of Martial Law. And it really describes these things in detail. And one statement it said is that Relic served as a prototype for many of the social concern organizations put up during the martial law years. It brought students truly down from the hill and into the lives of their countrymen and women in the provinces. So, I became Dean of Ateneo College. I was actually appointed in 1972. I assumed office formally in 1973, because in 1972 I was still doing my third year in theology. I wasn't finished yet with my theology studies. But officially I was really carrying out the main jobs of a dean. So I was also the dean that kind of got co-education passed in 1972. So that was also very memorable. We celebrated in 2022, 50 years of co-education. All right. So what was my context? I had always been very concerned about the problem of farmers and workers in the country. And because I read through history of the Philippines, I hope you do that, I really read a lot about peasant revolts, farmer revolts. I studied the rise of the Communist Party and the Socialist Party in the early 1900s, and the impact of the Russian Revolution and the Chinese Revolution in the Philippines. And I was always asking myself, where is the Philippines in all of this? So that was always a deep concern of mine. And so therefore, when these student revolts started and the call of down from the hill, I asked myself, how should Ateneo respond? PUP were responding in very radical ways. They were very much with the National Democratic Front and the CPP-NPA. But I had to find a way that was also along Catholic and Jesuit culture and values. So that was my challenge as dean. Together with other friends, we said, we have to respond to the call of the times, to respond to the needs of workers and farmers, but we have to do it in a way that is along our own culture and beliefs. And that was the challenge, and that was the challenge of OSCI. How would you do that? So a priority for me was to find a path for Ateneo College to respond as a Catholic and Jesuit school. I had many, many meetings with a lot of young people. Dodillian Parco, I remember, Dean Dallas. We spent many hours in my office talking about how do we respond. And eventually we began to come to what is now OSCI or OSCI. So we said, look, Sarili has already shown us the way. One way, precisely, to bring Ateneans closer to workers and farmers. That is exactly what Sarili was doing. And so we could not have everybody going every weekend. But so we began with immersion programs. And at that time, an immersion program was a whole week, not just a weekend. And only one student per barrio. Why? Because so they have to talk to the people, otherwise they just talk to each other. Some parents were very worried, but we assured them that we were keeping track of them, that we only sent them to places where we knew the people. But it was very, very powerful. If you ever have a chance, there was an issue of a guidance of that time which wrote the stories about 10 of them, 10 of the first ones who went to that immersion program. So that was one. Very intense, much more intense immersion programs than we have now. And then we actually had 2 or 3 summer work camps, we call them, called Sandiwa, where we stayed for a whole summer, the whole summer in barrios in Laguna. I remember a barrio Dia in Santa Cruz, Laguna, and barrios in other parts of Laguna. And some faculty joined, Father Gorospe joined, and Father Mario Francisco joined, and several faculty members also joined. So it's a very intense engagement with the poor. We put up, and I used to give the talks, what we call a general orientation seminar, and it was really to help the student body to understand the dynamics of this fundamental problem, the concentration of wealth in a few, wealth, power, and good education, and poverty of the masses, and to explain what it means for the country, what the impact. And get the students to say, ask what should we do about it, or should we do anything about it, and what can we do? And they, of course they would say we have to create a more equal society. We have to create a better society. So I'm almost sure everybody would say that. But then the question I said, all right, so we agree that this is not a good situation. We agree that we have to move to a situation of greater equality. The next question is, who will bring us there? Who will bring us there? I used to tell this fable of Aesop's fable about the cat and the mice. I think you know that. The mice came together because they had a problem. They were getting caught by the cat. And so they said, what shall we do about it? And they finally said, after their strategic planning, they said, oh, we have a solution. We're an early warning system. We're going to put a bell on the cat. And they were very happy with their solution. They started running to their holes. And then a little mouse said, who will bell the cat? So that's the thing. In other words, we said, okay, nice solution. We have to create a more equal Philippines. Pero sinong gagawa? Who is going to do that? And of course, in the analysis, we realized it's not very likely that the people at the top, that the rich will do it. They're not likely to give up their wealth. But some may be interested in doing something. And then when you talk about the very poor, wala naman silang kaya, wala silang pinag-aralan. It's very difficult. So what do we do about it? Well, Jesuits met about it, and in particular, there was a committee that was put up by the provincial at that time, Father Benny Mayo, and there were 3 main writers who will bring us to a better future. There was a policy paper on education in 1975, and the 3 main writers were Father de la Costa, Father Carol, and myself. And we said, who will bring us there? Well, first eventually we have to have leaders from the ground. We have to have leaders who come from the poor themselves, because they are the ones who really want the change. They are the ones who really want the change. On the other hand, they need help from the top. And so we also need to train leaders at the top, maybe Ateneans, who will be sympathetic and will work with them. So there was this dual strategy, and try to get them to meet together. Sounds very nice, but not so easy. So what did happen? So it led us to go beyond OSCI and say we also then have to have organizations that work with the people of the masses. So OSCI expanded to become what CCS, Center for Community Services, and we had a wing, Workers' College, which worked with organizing workers. If you ever have a chance, you can talk to Mayan de Rosas Ignacio. I remember her as a sophomore. She was organizing workers along near Guadalupe Bridge, and chatting with her once and said, "Man, how do you talk to them? They're so busy." "Well, you know, Father, the only time that I can talk with them is I drink with them after work. That's the only time they're ready to talk." And she did. She still works with the poor right now. But, so that was one. And then organizing for rural development, an organization for farmers. So in those years, we really, we not only were forming students, but we really work with organized groups of workers and farmers. So you see them on campus. We were not so strict about people coming in at that time. So they could actually come in. And so there was a lot more presence in those years of workers and farmers on campus. And then, aside from immersion programs, and aside from these general orientation seminars, where kind of teach-ins, we call them at that time, we tried to focus especially on potential student leaders. So we gave time to OSCI during the freshman orientation programs. I think we gave 6 hours to them. And they would go to these general orientation seminars, they would talk about the immersion programs, they would invite students to understand what Ateneo really wanted to do. And in particular, I asked them to spot potential leaders among the students, to identify potential leaders. And then we invited those potential leaders to a weekend leadership workshop, which we held in Antipolo. So there was also a specific program to address leaders. So, and the other interesting thing is that we invited these potential leaders to a weekend leadership program in Antipolo, and some of them became leaders of the organizations, and they helped the formation of social-oriented activities. Something I forgot to tell you. I don't know if you still have homeroom teachers now. That you do? Okay. So at that time, the English faculty were the homeroom, and so they helped in the facilitation of these workshops. And so the English faculty actually became one of the groups that was most engaged in the immersion and orientation programs. In fact, some of them, like Susana Evangelista, would actually tell her students to go visit a squatter community or a working community and then write their essays on them. Sorry, there's something I forgot. We began to form what they call socially oriented activities, ASIL, SCLC, ATSCA, several others became part of socially oriented activities. Theology of Liberation, Theology 141, I think, was established during that period, and as well as ECHO 177, which was taught by Father Vasquez, which included really a lot of engagement with workers and farmers. And as I said, English teachers invited the students to work with them. Impact. Social consciousness really became fashionable, if that's the right word, very much in the Ateneo of the 1970s and the 1980s. I remember one time talking to, I guess maybe Dr. Jojo Helena, or somebody like that, and was talking about these socially oriented activities. And so it's very easy, Father sabi niya. If you go to where the admission office is now, that used to be where the student activities were, and across is the cafeteria. And he said, on one side you had the socially oriented activities, and the other side you had the social groups now. It was actually very visible at that time. So it became quite important because maybe if you counted, maybe only 10% of the students were really strongly involved. But they were the leaders. They were the leaders. Because we had really worked hard to influence the leaders. And so they set the tone for the university. They influenced the articles in the Guidon. They influenced a lot of workshops and seminars. So we realized that if you want to change culture, you don't really have to change everybody. Today, we would say you have to change the influencers. At that time, we said the leaders. And if you can convince them, then they will set the tone. That was the culture at that time. So when I say that at that period there was a strong sense of social commitment, it was not so much that everybody was committed, but the dominant conversation was along these lines because the leaders were there. So the impact, one impact. One measure is you look at that book, Ateneo in the First 10 Years of Martial Law, there is a manifesto of the class of 1980, and they talk ang bagong Atenista, tao para sa kapwa, and they go in great detail. And among them are the presidents of Ateneo, Father Jet Villarin, was a class 1980, and also Father Bobby Yap come from that class. And many of them continued to work in social development. Many joined, the JVP program was established in 1980, and many joined that. So that was one impact that OSCI achieved in that time. Finally, because OSCI and the student movements had very strong ties with workers and farmers, when Ninoy Aquino was assassinated, and we would have these rallies and marches, we would have a mass in Santo Domingo Church, and then the NDF and PA people would go in one side. Usually they would go to Liwasang, we'd go to Luneta. We could mobilize big groups. We could mobilize big groups because we had big contacts with workers and farmers. So students at that time had a lot of links with organized farmer groups and organized workers groups. So I say in here, students could mobilize numbers and play an important role in the rallies with Cory after the assassination of Ninoy, and eventually in the 1986 revolution. You can see a lot of pictures of Ateneans during that period. In many ways, OSCI prepared Ateneo and Ateneans for the challenges and opportunities that came with the 1983 assassination of Ninoy and the EDSA revolution. So it prepared everybody in the campus for that time. Challenges. All right. The call of the times in late 60s, 1970 were one, we've described them. What are the times that we live in now? Well, unfortunately, inequality and poverty has actually grown worse, partly because of a bigger population. I don't think in the 60s or 70s that we talked about children dying of malnutrition. People were poor, but I don't think that was happening. And I don't think we're talking about reading poverty, children in grade 2, 3 who cannot read. They were not good, but it was not that bad. So in many ways, things are worse today. But the more important difference is that you don't have strong voices. Not from the church, that time, not from the Jesuits, and not maybe from Ateneo either. So the voices are muted today. Of course, Pope Francis is a very strong voice, but we admire him, but you don't have a passionate following along these lines. I think we follow him more about environment, but what I'd like to see, but not about poverty, inequality, and learning poverty, and so on. So that's a challenge at times. That's a challenge that we face. We live in a world which is, in a sense, unequal, and so many people suffering, us in the late 60s, 70s. But you don't have powerful voices calling out. Sorry. It's stuck. All right. And then the challenge of universities in particular. Because the dominant culture of universities today is competitiveness and publications, we tend in Ateneo, as all other universities, to measure ourselves by how we rank with other universities. We compare ourselves to other universities. Unlike in the 60s, 70s, when we tried to measure ourselves by what are we doing for the people. The speech that I gave in 1974, we said Ateneo in the service of the nation, tried to define what is Ateneo in the context of the Philippines, in the context of the College of Times. But today, when we talk about Ateneo or UP or LaSalle, we talk about it as how do we rank with other universities. The world of comparison is the world of other universities. I'm not saying it's bad, it's simply the reality that we face. And because of that, we don't ask ourselves as much, but what is our role in the context of the Philippines, in the context of the major problems that we face? So that's a big challenge that we face. I'm sorry, one more. The other problem is language. Language on the internet. We're speaking English. We're in an English-speaking world here. And because we're more comfortable with English, we tend to watch things in English. And so if you reflect on what we watch on television, on Netflix or on the internet, you can ask yourself, how much of it is about some other country, Korea, Japan, the US, and how much is it about farmers? What do you see in the virtual world about workers, farmers, urban poor, suffering children? Every now and then where it's a disaster, you see that there. So we're also put away. The globalization, social media, the internet actually pulls us outside these countries. And sometimes I just try to ask myself when I listen to our conversations with district residents, how much of our conversation is about our country? And how much of our conversation is about Trump or whatever is happening outside? So awareness of what's happening is not very strong. And so we are not so impacted by the reality of our country. And so I meet people who read about this reality that 95 Filipino children die of malnutrition every day. We have 90% reading poverty. And they're horrified by it, but they're not moved to do anything. It's not a call. It's not a call to do something. That's the world that we live in. I'm not saying it's anybody's fault, but it's the world that we live in. So our biggest challenge is that the forces in today's world detach us from the world of the majority poor. If you reflect on the things that enter your brain or your eyes, how many of them really call you to do something about the situation that established OSCI in the first place? How much of that? I hope that it is there, and how much of it pulls us away. That's the difficult challenge that we face today. The dominant forces pull us away, and unless we make a specific effort, we won't move forward. All right, so what can we do about this? I asked myself, OSCI saw a model in Sarilika, in a group of Ateneans in 1972, who showed us the way by going every weekend to work with farmers in Central Luzon. Is there a similar thing happening today? I discuss this a lot with young people. I work with a group of many Ateneans who still engage in these things, and we talk about it. Is there really a movement today among the young? Can we identify some who really are committed to working with the poor, doing something about these injustices, and can show us the way in some way? I say maybe because I'm not sure. However, I'm working with Ateneo Social Development, Gawad Kalinga, which is ACE, Ateneo Center of Educational Development. As you know, we have a feeding program. We provide food packs to about several thousand families every week. With GK Ateneo, which works with very poor communities. And today, there is a growing concern about child hunger and malnutrition and about reading and learning poverty. But the question is, what do you do about it? Is anybody doing anything about it? And are they showing us the way? So for me, one direction today that is calling us is there are groups that are showing what you can do. I'll show you just one. So for three Januaries now, we've been holding a workshop with about 60 young people, 40 of them with Gawad Kalinga National, many of them coming from the poor communities. They are the leaders on the ground. They're really working there on the ground. And what do we do in the 3 days that we are there? We basically share experiences and talk on how we can grow this engagement with the realities on the ground. And as it's turning out, more and more of them are actually shifting to what we call feeding programs and oral programs. We're focusing more and more on the children and seeing what we can do for the children. I'll just show you one of them. One of them I work with a lot is a young woman, Alni SPL, who works in Siargao. You may think Siargao is rich because of the surfing. That's only General Luna. The other places are very poor. So what is happening now is that these groups, some of them are into building houses, some in other things. We are now really pivoting to child hunger and reading poverty. We can discuss why, but that's what's happening. Of the young leaders I work with among the poor, some are from Ateneo, some are the leaders. Chelsea Paterno, I don't know if you know her, works in this area. But many of them actually come from the GK communities. They actually grew very poor themselves. But they've grown and they are now leaders. And I'd like to talk about the young woman I work with in Siargao, Alni SPL. That's her. She grew up in Siargao in a poor family. She was a working student in college in the state university there, Surigao del Norte State U. And she worked with Cebu Pacific and she taught IT. But she's now a full-time worker in, I don't know if you know where Dinagat and Siargao are. We got involved there because of Typhoon Odette. So I've been visiting there regularly because of the damage of Typhoon Odette. So what do we do? I'll just show you what it does. We used to call it oral program, but the government calls it oral now. So it's easier to read program. And so this one, sorry, I don't have to show it. So this is an oral session. They get older students to tutor the children, the non-readers, every Saturday. Can you see the pictures? This is happening in many places. This is just one of them. And there is one particular sitio Laonan, where we do about 45 children under the guidance of one of the mothers there. They do reading programs for them. And the students are doing much better in school. We also do feeding for them. So this Nanay Jeanne, who tutors them, also cooks for them. So we have a picture there. And then we go, who has been to Siargao here? Yeah, so General Luna, and then from General Luna, by an hour by pump boat, I've been there. There are two little islands, Suyangan and Sitio Mamon, and they're very, very poor. In fact, we were shocked that some kids in Sitio Mamon were eating sand because they were so hungry. And so we now do oral tutor programs and feeding programs for them. So what I want to tell you is that this is happening now in many, many places. And then Socorro. Have you heard about Socorro Island? We heard about that cult, this that was being investigated by, that's in Socorro. It's an island off Siargao mainland. And this cult, SBSI, Socorro Bayanihan Services Incorporated. We are working with the families that have left the cult. And again, we have the problem of hunger and education. So we do community and school feeding for them. And Anne is in charge of all of this. So that's what we have. This is now going in a big way, where I can have another time to talk with you that Dr. Carmela Roxanne, the director of ACE, is now Assistant Secretary of DepEd, and she's in charge right now of the remedial grading program. And I don't know how many of you remember Joanne Hernandez. She is also Assistant Secretary now of DepEd. So the two of them are working together to launch massive remedial reading programs across the country. So that's one thing I might invite you to reflect on. Maybe I can end there, and hopefully our respondents can tell us what we can do. Thank you very much.
So thank you very much, Father Ben, for not just the stories, no, but of course there are lessons there, and there are also paghamon, no, certain challenges being posed to us, but also showing us some action, no, and hopefully the actions that are being taken give us hope. No. Now, at this point, we'll be introducing our reactors. So as reactors, they may give some feedback or reactions, of course, to the input of Father Ben, while also sharing some of their experiences, some of their insights to us. No? So there are three, and I'll call each one of them, and they'll have about 5 to 10 minutes to address the plenary. And so we'll begin with the current Program Assistant Director of OSCI's third year formation program, or NSTP 12. Big kiss. Oh, we're hearing some fans there. Sige, palakpakan nyo na po. Miss Helena, Hela, sorry. Hela pala yun yung sa Marvel Cinematic Universe. No, sorry. Hela, Roxanne, Indigne. All right. So she's an alumna of the Ateneo de Manila University and graduated with a degree in Management Economics in 2009. Sorry, I had to read that, Hela. No? So, Hela, okay. She also holds a Master's in International Development from the University of Kent, Brussels School for International Studies. Wow, all right. And apart from her role in the university service learning, Hela is deeply involved in youth ministry, serving as the co-head of Timothy Youth Ministry. Her work is a testament to her commitment to empowering the Filipino youth, emphasizing the importance of formation in shaping their values and social action. So, ladies and gentlemen, let's hear it from Hela Indigne.
Yung reaction ng mga tao parang di makapaniwala no? Ayan, magandang gabi sa inyong lahat. I hope nobody minds if I speak in both Filipino and English. Okay lang naman. Meron bang dudugo yung ilong dito pag nagtagalog ako? Okay, formators, kaya na nila yan. Okay. Ang hirap sagutin ng tanong ni Father Ben, parang what can we do now? No. Hindi, sige. Gusto ko lang siguro magsimula with an invitation, kwento ng isang invitation. Actually, invitation to ni Father Ben noon. Nung nag-start ako sa OSCI noong 2017, hindi pa ako sa OSCI full-time, no? I worked with Attorney Helena sa VPSD. And then, I think during the first semester, first few months nung nandun ako, parang an invitation came from Father Ben's office. That was 2017, that was the year of the Marawi siege. May nangyari yun, tama ba, Father? And then I think we went, so the invitation was to go there in November or October, I think we went. Tapos ako, game naman ako. So, paalam ako sa nanay ko, no? Sabi ng nanay ko, di ba delikado din? Sabi ko, ma, huwag kang mag-alala, kasama ko si Father Ben, walang mangyayari sa amin. So, in short na, parang bulletproof, si vest namin si Father Ben nun. Ba't ko sinabi yun? Kasi siguro parang, ganun yung OSCI ngayon, no? Invitation siya, pag-aanyaya siya. Una siguro yung context muna of where we are today. Pandemic, no? Parang coming off of the pandemic. And I guess Kat later can correct me if I'm wrong with this. Parang naging mas closed off tayo, di ba? Hindi ko alam kung kayo ganun, pero ako oo. And I think that's common to all the experiences. Kasi di ka makalabas wala kang social interaction, di ba? Meron online, pero iba pa din yun Iba yun yakap mo na, awakan mo, naaamoy mo, di ba? Parang, and if yung context ni Father Ben noon, nandun talaga sila, di ba? Kasama mo yung farmers na every weekend for a month. That's different, even when we had our formation programs nung pandemic. So may ganong aspect. A lot of the students, siguro may mga seniors ba dito na, ayan, I think nakaranas, or juniors siguro nakaranas pa ng online, no? Another context now is, and I was talking to some of the OSCI formators about this, is parang overstimulation. Ang dami nating nakukuha na information. Actually, ang dami natin nakukuha. Hindi ko alam kung yung feed nyo puro nega. Sino dito ang ganun? Ako minsan, lalo na nung elections, di ba? Ang daming nangyayari, sabay-sabay. And feeling natin, kailangan tugunan lahat. Kaya nag-end up, siguro, parang overwhelmed. No? Ano ba yung uunahin ko? And then, ang tendency now is, sige, wala na lang akong gagawin. Or, yes, ang daming kailangan gawin, parang hindi ko alam saan ako magsisimula. Parang ganon yung context ngayon, no? So, merong parang polls, sige, I wouldn't call it polls, pero nandyan siya, naglalaro siya, may mga desensitized, tama ba? Ayan. Desensitized. Kanina pa ito, hindi ko nga ma-spell kanina to Merong mga desensitized, tapos, nandito din ang mga mulat, no? Pero, hindi alam saan papasok. Anong gagawin? How to get involved. So siguro kung tatanungin parang ano ang relevance ni OSCI ngayon, ito yun, parang may siguro 4 na punto dito. Una, presensya. Si Kuya Joel, one of our formators in Big Kiss, matagal na din siyang formator dito, no? Lagi niya sinasabi na yung trabaho namin is a ministry of presence, no? And I think it goes beyond OSCI as well. I think the students who are here are also invited for that, no, to be involved in that. Makisalamuha, no, sa labas ng pangkaraniwan na karanasan. Diba? So, yun yung una. Pangalawa, involvement. No? And I think that's what the OSCI, I think yung ngayon, yung program ng OSCI from Binhi to Punla to Bigis, so the 3 years, kind of give us that patikim, that exposure, in the daily lives, in the advocacies, in the work of our partner organizations and institutions. No? So, the chance to be involved. And I know some of the students will say, ang bitin naman yan, ma'am, or parang surface level lang siya. To some extent, yes, but depends also on our openness. Third point, I think parang political action, no? And I think, i-frame ko to in a sense na political action na harnessing power and channeling it towards a personal or shared commitment to social change in every facet of our lives. And what does this mean, or what does it look like? Parang yung dala natin, yung mga kwento ng mga nakakasalamuha natin through the programs, or maybe even outside, no? Now that we've also revitalized sana, buhok yarn, revived the student the OSCI student volunteer program, no? So, yun, parang to take the stories of those we encounter and take that into account when making our own choices. So, for example, dala natin, pagpunta natin sa eleksyon, parang naiisip natin, ito bang iboboto ko to para sa sarili ko lang o para din ba dun sa mga nakasalamuha ako, para din ba sa ibang tao? And also other choices, I guess, yung nabanggit ni Father Ben kanina, no, that Pope Francis is very loved or parang admired for Laudato Si. And that comes into play din. Parang, okay, so yung choice ba natin ng take-out ngayon, tatapon lang ba natin yan? So and so forth, diba? So integrating those into our own personal commitments. And then the fourth and the last, no, is integration. I know gasgas na gasgas tong word na to, especially when we talk about the curriculum and what we do in OSCI. But I think one of the points na nabanggit ni Father Ben kanina is the focus on rankings, no? The university's focus on rankings. So efforts are being geared towards that, towards meeting expectations dun sa rankings, ganun. But may middle ground kasi yan eh. And integration is that yung reconciling the expectation of academic institution, of the call of an academic institution, versus the call of, to solidarity with our stakeholders, no? And I think it's a meeting each other of where we all are. No? And madugo siya, and it's often not as ideal as what we'd imagined. And I think one of the stories lang that I want to, since nandito si Sir Mark, naalala ko to kanina, one of the stories that I want to bring to light is, for example, with the DS program, no? In Big Kiss, it's a whole year program where in the first semester, meron silang proposal and then the implementation is on the second semester. But what struck me with yung kwento ni Sir Mark is, yung ibang groups daw, parang niyayaya na sa birthdays ng community, ganyan, yung pupunta lang doon na makikitambay, not to the extent siguro na kwento ni Father Ben na makikipag-inuman sa gabi kasi delics tayo doon, but there, parang grounding that integration in the relationship and wanting to be involved in the lives of our partners, no, more than the academic. So, yun, no, parang sabi sa inyo, mabilis lang to, parang, and I want to end with that OSCI is a continuous invitation, no, hindi siya malinis, hindi siya madali, hindi rin siya, we shouldn't look at the programs, or at least what OSCI is doing, as the end goal, but rather parang a continuous, wala akong ibang term kundi invitation, pag-anyaya, no? Tinagalog ko lang. Pag-anyaya na makilahok, no? Na makialam, in whatever way we can. And I think that is most empowering also to our youth now, no? Especially with the thought na maybe, anong magagawa ko ngayon na estudyante ako? But yun. So, there are many things that are in your capacity, in our capacity as the youth. Just, lumagpas na ako dun sa, sa technical aspect nun. But there are many things in your capacity as a youth. And I think OSCI being streamlined now into your specific disciplines, your specific programs, bridging from binhi to punla to Big Kiss, no, deepening of that involvement and immersion in the lives of our partners is a starting point, no. So yun lang, doon lang ako magtatapos. Maraming salamat.
Ay sa paghamon at sa pagbahagi na kung ano maaari nating magawa, no, at ang ating mga estudyante. At sa pagsabi rin na isa palang agimat si Father Ben. Oo. Our next speaker asked me to introduce him with just one line. But against doctor's orders, all right, I will not do that and say a little more about him. Okay. He has been with the Ateneo for 28 years, and he has served as the director of the Health Sciences Program of the School of Science and Engineering from 2006 to 2018. And in 2019, he was appointed university physician to address occupational health and safety for employees. Then in 2022, he became the Assistant Vice President for Health, Care, and Well-Being, a position he currently holds. And in addition to all of this, and his faculty and administrative duties, so parang hindi po siya masyado busy, no? He also serves as the executive director, no, of the Tulong Dunong Foundation. So ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome Dr. Norman Dennis Marquez, or as we lovingly call him, Doc Sho.
Magandang gabi po sa kanilang lahat. Salamat sa pagsuway sa doctor's orders. Okay, I'll try to be as brief as I can because I think there are many more conversations that will follow. But, you know, looking back, about what, a week ago ba? Sinabi mo sa akin? When I was asked to be a reactor to Father Ben's presentation, my initial response was, okay, yun na yung reaction ko. I mean, Father Ben, no? Oh, by the way, it's not 28 years, 30 years. Going on my 31st year. Okay. I'm only saying that because I think my response will be coming from 30 years of being with students, no? Journeying with students. And yun na nga, nung sinabi to respond to this, for this presentation, I've followed Father Ben, no, since I started and I shifted career to teaching, no. So I to some extent, it's both an honor and scary to be responding, no. But sabi nga niya sa akin kanina, why will you have to be scared or to be nervous, no? One, I think because what I'd like to share this evening is not just about my experiences in the last 30 years, but with students. But I think a big part of what I'm going to say also carries with it how I've managed to survive 30 years of Ateneo. Okay. Sige. So, Father Ben talked about the context, no, of how OSCI, yeah, nung time namin OSCI pa yun, no, how it went, no, how the development, he told the story, okay, and I think a big part of that story has to deal with what Ateneo has tried to do over those years, and that is responding to the mission. And I'd like to go back to that word mission, no? Baka kasi yun yung nakakalimutan natin, no? Hila has been talking about the invitation. But what is the invitation? The invitation is not about sacrifice, I think. The invitation is not about going out of your comfort zone, although that is necessary, I think. But I think it's really the invitation towards mission. And we need to go back to that, particularly in our context, in the context of our education. No? It's a mission statement, no? That when we respond to the call of the times, we are doing it as in the Ignatian context of mission, which is following God's call or heeding God's call. No? And oftentimes, in our desire to do our best and our desire to be efficient and to address the task, again, the task, we get fixated with the task that we forgot that it's not just a target that we're trying to reach. It's really a mission that we are responding to. And by mission, I think it's important to look at it in terms of three things. Okay? I think the first is we talk about competency o kakayahan. Minsan kasi yung dating natin, ano ba yung magagawa ko? Ang naisip pag natin, what is going to be convenient for us? Ano yung madaling gawin? Totoo naman yun eh. Doon naman talaga lahat tayo magsisimula sa madali. But I think the deeper response is, after that, after the initial salvo, how do we sustain it? Or are we going to be contented with the fact na, oh, may nagawa na ako, I feel good, move on na ulit ako. Competence is required to address this mission because we cannot give what we don't have. I always talk about that, no, in my classes. Kasi sabi ko nga, kung may gagawin ka at it's worth doing, then it has to be done with our best, not just effort, no? People talk about that. Sir, pwede bang tumaas yung grade ko? Effort naman ako eh. But it's not just about effort. Di ba? It has to be meaningful effort na may results din. And I think that's the big difference, no? Between responding as a knee-jerk reaction and responding as a mission, to a mission. Okay. So competence, no? We talk about excellence in the Ateneo, but I think what we have been losing in the message is that this excellence is always towards a mission. Second point to that mission, I think, is what we call character. No? Kasi pwedeng maging magaling, pero hindi mabuti, medyo hindi rin yan sumusunod o umaayon dun sa pagtugon sa isang mission. And I think as part of our formation, no, it is clear that excellence or that competence and that character will have to go together. Dahil yung pamamaraan ng paggamit ng kakagalingan sa pagtugon sa isang misyon ay dapat rin makatao, makadiyos. And that's why we need to build character. And that's trying to expand more the formation that we go through in this university. And the third item that goes with that mission, I think na minsan nakakalimutan natin, no, yung tinatawag nating commitment. Okay. So commitment kasi hindi yan one time big time, no? Sabi nga noong time na yon, no, 1 week, 1 month. Ngayon we talk about afternoon, 1, 2, 3 afternoons or 1 weekend. Okay? Kaya ang pakiramdam ng mga estudyante bitin, pero yung pagkabitin na yon, hindi naman yun sasagutin lang ng isang punta eh. Kung nabitin ka, ang tanong, nasaan yung commitment? Kung naipakita mo yung competence mo at character mong makatotohanan, saan mo hahatakin at itutulak pa lalo towards a larger commitment. No? Kaya nga naging problema lagi, papasok yung volunteer, after natapos yung klase, yung semester, wala na. Next na naman, and then alis, next, alis, next, alis. Okay. So, I think yun yung minsan nagiging challenge ng OSCI, ng OSCI. No? Paano itutuloy yon? Paano itutuloy? And that's a bigger issue. Sabi nga ni Father Ben, mas malaking usapan yun eh. No? So, hindi ko muna yun, ipapark muna natin yan. Kasi gusto ko lang banggitin yun. No? Again, responding to the call of the times for us in the Ignatian character, true character, it has to be within the context of that mission. A mission that will entail competence, character, commitment. Okay? Having said that, no, siguro yung susunod na challenge rin para sa atin do sa tanong na, okay, so what can we do now? Okay. I think it's important to understand also that our response to the mission is not just about us. No? Malaking bagay lagi yung pinagmumulan yung konteksto because engagement along the lines of the Ignatian mission means building relationships as well. And I think because we're often too focused on the task at hand, we forget that we have to build a relationship with the community. No? You can call it inuman, tambay, you can call it kulitan, but I think for the most part, it's really genuinely engaging the other as other. Kilalanin. No? Kilalanin. And because I've always believed that addressing mission is also about companionship. Companionship with people who will help you and people who you think you will help and save, but on the contrary, eventually, people who also teach and give you a lot to you, yung komunidad. And that's why, dun ngayon yung tanong kanina, di ba? Saan mo dadalin yon? Dun sa yung commitment na yon. I think dun mo dadalin. Doon sa tinatawag nating pag-agapay. How do we now become companions, not just of among ourselves, but companions of the communities and the people that we'd like to help? Not save, by the way, help. Diba? Sabi nga, hindi na natin pwedeng gamitin yung save. Naunahan na tayo ni Kristo dun sa pagsagip eh. Di ba? So, hindi na natin yung gagawin. And often, because dun sa pag-agapay na yun, we need resources. Ang tanong, hanggang saan mo dadalhin yun as a student? Pagkatapos, pagka-graduate natin, saan natin gagawin? Paano natin bubuhayin yun? We've been talking about yun, professional for others as well. So, itutuloy yun. Di ba? Where am I leading? I think, therefore, part of the, I'm not saying this is a solution, Father, but my idea is, how do we begin to continuously engage? We've been talking about how alumni can continue to be part of our mission, but how do we continue that conversation? No? The conversation with alumni, no? Conversation with, so that we can talk about sustainability of our efforts and therefore we can begin to talk about impact. Diba? Ang hirap pag-usapan yung impact kung hindi natin masustain. Mahirap natin masustain kung fragmented yung gagawin natin. Okay? And therefore, importante then to look at all of this, and I'd like to close this now, otherwise hindi ako titigil dito. Nangingiti na si Lilan sa akin eh. So, paano ko tatapusin? Siguro yung isang, again, going back to how I started, that when we serve and when we respond to the call of the times, to look at it as mission and therefore to look at it as this response as an act of faith and an act of love, which often hindi na pag-uusapan dahil nafi-fixate tayo doon sa resources, sa strategies, sa metrics, etc. But forget or sometimes overlook or hindi masyado na pagtutuunan ng pansin yung sinasabi natin pagbuo ng relationship at pag-agapay. So if we will always remember that responding to the call of the time is our act of faith and our act of love, then maybe we will be able to transcend the boundaries of our limitations, but also I think it is what will allow us to see more clearly that it is not upon our own strengths alone that we will succeed, but rather upon the strengths and even the weaknesses of the others that we will work with, that we will accompany with, or who will accompany with us as well, okay? And therefore, maybe that's what will bring us to better success. And that will give us better clarity, and that will give us more energy, because we know that that act of faith, that act of love, is centered to the true source of our faith and our love, which is God. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Doc Sho. Okay, just as a quick, I'm not really going to summarize what Doc Sho mentioned, but highlight certain things. He used the letter C a lot, and just to share with you, so the Jesuits gave us the 5 C's, and Doc Sho also offers us tonight similar C's. He talks about competence, he talks about character, he talks about commitment, and most importantly, he talks about companionship with the community members. And then he mentioned another C towards the end, which I think sort of brings it together, and that's actually communication, or conversation, I think is the word that he used, but it's really that connection, the thing that may bind us so that we could act possibly as one with greater impact. So muli, maraming salamat, Doc Sho. So we've heard from our formators, we've heard from our faculty and administrators, of course, we've heard from Father Ben. But I think it's always because we are saying we are co-journeyers, so let's now hear from one of our students, right? So our next reactor is a senior graduate, of course, here with us, pursuing a Bachelor of Arts degree in psychology. Her interests lie in youth education and formation, human relationship behavior, and the interaction of online pop culture and psychology. She actively serves as chairperson of the OSCI or OSCI Student Volunteer Formation Center, and is a part-time tutor for elementary and high school students under New Leaf Learning PH. So ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome Ms. Jeanne Lovelle Sañarez.
So, hi everyone. Magandang gabi po sa inyong lahat. I'm Kat. So, very interesting yung perspective ko, I would say, after hearing everything from Father Ben, Ate Hila, and Doc Sho. Father Ben mentioned that one of the challenges that OSCI and, the whole Ateneo in general is facing today is detachment. And Ate Hila was talking about an invitation, OSCI being an invitation na makilaho, makisalamuha. And I guess my perspective is coming from someone who came, who detached from that detachment, who heard that invitation and decided to, be curious enough to see what it's about, like see what is this invitation. So, nagsimula ako, like many of you guys here, with NSTP. NSTP was my first real, siguro, exposure to the world outside of my bubble. So I would actually like to thank OSCI for helping me discover the passion that I have for service learning and social formation and community building. From the first few conversations during Binhe, to researching and realizing the extent of the realities during Punla, to fully creating concrete actions to address their needs through Big Kiss. O, di ba? Halatang nakinig during NSTV. Charot! Looking back, I think of, these experiences I've had and why, parang, bakit nga ba, out of all of the invitations in the world that I could hear, parang I was moved to respond to this one. And this is exactly what, the Ateneo and our institution, not just us towards, through its formation programs, through our encounters with marginalized communities, and through the simple question, simple but profound, how can we serve? Kaya nga parang ang big din ng question ni Father Ben na parang what can we do? Yung sabi nga rin ni Ate Hila, one of the things a lot of us may hear is parang, ano bang magagawa mo? Estudyante ka lang. But, thinking about that our experiences now, we are not just students, parang, or even as students, marami na tayong nagagawa. Think about, I'm pretty sure, sino ba dito member ng org? I'm pretty sure marami tayo we hold positions or we are very, very active in our orgs. And, that's concrete action, that's a concrete example na hindi ka lang estudyante, may nagagawa tayo. And so, hearing about OSCI's 50-year journey has reaffirmed something that I was thinking about while preparing for this. Oh my God, yes. Is that our work as students and volunteers is part of a much bigger story, particularly as students of the Ateneo. It's a continuation of a vision that was set in motion decades ago, a vision that's rooted in justice, solidarity, and pursuit of the common good. Nabanggit nga kanina yung challenges natin today, parang that detachment. We are so very focused on being in our online world, looking at what we see on our Facebook feeds, on our Twitter feeds, and not really realizing that what we see online is not necessarily the reality. Diba? Parang it becomes more clear to us, particularly through what we've heard today, na outside of our little bubbles, there are these communities. And, hearing that invitation to get to know these communities becomes very much more important. As I reflect on all of this, parang I realized that OSCI's legacy, particularly as a student who came from the programs of OSCI, who is currently helping OSCI with those programs and my fellow students, it's a living call to action. Very, very repetitive siguro siya, the invitation. But it's because the work is not finished. Diba? The structures of injustice na naging dahilan kung bakit nagawa ang OSCI, they're still very much prevalent today. Diba? In new and evolving forms. As students, diba, parang we are part of this mission. Nabanggit nga ni Dr. Shaw na we are a part of this mission. Kailangan rin natin tanungin ng sarili natin, paano ba natin ito magagawa na more than a requirement? As students who are probably also taking NSDP, how can you make service learning more than just a requirement? How can we make it a lifelong commitment? How do we integrate it into our careers, our relationships, and the way we move through the world, particularly for mga seniors tulad ko na after this month, we are about to enter the real world. But I believe that the answer lies, in deepening our relationships with the communities that we serve. To echo yung sinabi ni Doc Shaw kanina, hindi enough na bumisita ka lang once or even twice, na makikinig ka lang sa isang conversation, na magsiserve ka sa isang outreach program ng one time, that's okay na yon. Formation happens in long-term partnerships, walking with our communities and allowing them, allowing our encounters with them to transform us, immersing ourselves in their realities. So, to my fellow students, you are not just students, you are also leaders. You are part of this mission, and I hope that after hearing lahat ng nabanggit tonight, you also allow yourselves to be curious enough about what this invitation is, not just OSCI's invitation, but the message, the actual message of what that invitation is. Not just to look back on what OSCI has done, but on the steps that we can do next. So as nabanggit ni Father Ben po kanina, our future is full of hope, but that future also depends on us, on whether or not we choose to listen, and to answer that call. Maraming salamat po.
Thank you very much, Kat. It's always a moment of pride and consolation to hear our students and say these things. Also, you remind me of a young Ate Floy and a young Abby Vic. It must be the ponytail. No? Okay. So at this point, we'll be having a Q&A, all right? So if I may request our reactors and Father Ben to please join me here in front. And so maybe we would like to hear, of course, this time from our plenary, our students, our formators, all our guests present. No? So we'll dedicate about 5 to 10 minutes for this, okay? So just please raise your hand if you have a question or a comment, and I'll call on you. I'll lend you the mic, and then you can address it to either a specific reactor or to everyone to everyone here with us. So might there be anyone among our audience who'd like to start with a question or a comment? Warming up, okay? Thinking, reflecting, which is why I started warming up a while ago, okay? And then started reflecting already. You know, I'd address this primarily to Father Ben, but of course our reactors can also give input on this, no? Father Ben used a word that even back in our time as students was already being offered to us, and it's counterculture, Father, no? Counterculture. And right now we're noticing that the world has a very interesting set of values, and therefore it influences the culture. But how exactly does Ateneo or student groups or an individual start something that's counter to the prevailing and perhaps iffy culture around us? So paano po maaring simulan ng isang counterculture?
Well, you see, the prevailing culture of today's world is really individualist, no? Or maybe family at the most, no? Filipino families are now applying for golden visas to go abroad. So we define, I guess, a good future for ourselves and for family. So the counterculture is, do you care for others in this country? Do you care especially for people in need, no? And I think that, so that, of course, the examples that, and for me, I always find that the measure for me is, do you give time? People are willing to give money, but rarely are willing to give time. But you cannot build relationships without giving time. And so for me, counterculture really would be an openness to giving time. Initially, it might be physical time you go in there, but let's say let us say you have been staying with a family for immersion and so on. Do you keep in touch? They're on Facebook. Do you keep in touch with them? So essentially, because what happens then is that their world becomes a real world to you. Because the majority of people in the upper middle class, the Philippines, that is not a real world out there. But it has to become real to each one of us. You all remember always that when God became man in Jesus Christ, he spent 30 years. He gave time. He spent 30 years in this liblib na lugar, Nazareth, ignorant people, uneducated people, and so on. He gave time. We forget that very much. And so even God had to spend time to connect. So that's really for me is because what exactly you will do, only time will tell. But you will never do them without the relationship, without the commitment, without being there, without their reality, without them becoming real to you and influencing you. So connection, contact, relationship is what shapes counterculture, who are important to you.
Thank you, Father Ben. Would any of our reactors want to add to that? So it's pretty much
I
time.
think you've all said that.
Okay, yes. And of course, in our current context where time, everything is minamadali, instant, no? So I guess Father, correct me if I'm wrong, a Jerry contra, diba? It's a, that desire to do something, you have to sometimes go against it, no? Especially if that initial desire is not actually a good one. No. Okay. This one is from one of our formators, all right? And it's about, I guess, a language barrier, okay? So, I'll just read it, no? So, maraming estudyante ang English speaking, all right? At do we think it's really actually getting in the way? Nakakahadlang ba ito dun sa pakikitungo, pakikisama sa ating mga kasama sa komunidad? At kung oo, paano kaya ito matutugunan? So is the language barrier getting in the way of connecting with our communities? And if so, what can we do? No? Father, and then again.
Actually, kung bababad sila, mapipilitan silang mag-Pilipino, mag-Cebuano. But it will change if you, kasi if you really get to know community and care, you will find a way to communicate with them. Of course, you may be afraid to go because of that. Pilitin mo na lang. Just go.
Sige. Ako, sa karanasan, no, gaya na sinasabi ni Father Ben, initial lang siya. And I would like to think na yung mga foreign students nga natin dito, kaya nilang pag iniwan natin sa area, kaya nila eh. So what more tayo na lumaki tayo sa konteksto na to, di ba? I think there are a lot of shared stories also, and shared, I don't know, siguro dreams and aspirations na once that is put across, no, put on the table, dun nagsisimula yon. So, maybe yes, at the start, it can be a barrier, pero dami ko na nakita na nagtatranslate yung mga kasama nilang groupmates para sa kanya, gano'n. So, hindi ko alam, baka si Kat may ano doon.
I think similar experiences din. Parang at first, may, moment of awkwardness. But eventually naman, I think given rin kasi na parang very resourceful ng mga like makikita mo lalabas sila ng phone, ilalabas ng Google Translate para lang ma-translate yung gusto silang masabihin para marinig nung partner community. But then yun nga, at the same time, having other group mates who will help translate and help get that message across. So yeah, I think nagagawa naman ng paraan.
What some formators do in engagements is they ask parang ano ba yung gusto niyong tanungin? Tapos daanan natin para natin i-translate to ng mas maiintindihan. So yun.
Yeah.
The bigger problem with this is that the family has already decided to not live in this country. No? That's the bigger problem. It's not so much that hindi pwede kayong makikisalamuha sa mga tao. Kaya lang kung pinili ang isang pamilya na English ang gagamitin nila, in a sense, they've made the decision not to be in this country in reality. No?
Yes.
Physically nandito, pero in reality wala dito. That's the bigger problem. No?
Thank you, Father. Okay, so maybe there are questions from our audience. Yes, sir. So two gentlemen, sir, with a darker gray, please come forward. Kindly introduce yourself and then your question.
Hello, I am Sean Lamson, second year under ABIS. My question, jumping off from the previous, instead of, let's say, a language barrier, what if you as a student or and the family that you're staying with during your immersion, what if you hold different values amongst yourselves, be it political or any sort of values like that? How would you be able to connect with someone when your viewpoints of the world are fundamentally opposed to one another? Thank you.
Mahirap yung tanong na yun, so si Father Ben yung sasagot.
Yeah. Try to understand where they're coming from. For example, one of the things that differentiate people a lot is how they feel about the drug war, about Duterte, and so on. I was teaching STS-10, and one time we would be taking addiction and shabu. And I would ask the students in my class to interview two sets of people, their friends, their family, and so on, and then interview the girls in the cafeteria and the security guards. Hindi pareho ang sagot. With their families and so forth, galit lang sila kay Duterte, they're focused on the EJK. Pero kung kausapin mo yung mga girls sa cafeteria, sasabihin nila, ayaw namin yung patayan, pero we support the drug war. Why? Kasi we live in the squatter areas. We feel safer going home. So you have to begin to understand sometimes the difference is because they live in a different context. If you don't live in a squatter area, hindi ka natatakot about security. Pero sila, I know because I used to say Mass in Old Balara and I'd go down to the squatter area. Bakit may isang sinaksak? Kasi umuwi siya ng hating gabi, may nagiinuman, hindi ba gandang tingin? Sinaksak, no? That's the world that many of them live. So sometimes you have to understand where they're coming from. Maybe after that you still disagree, pero give it a try. Ask where they're coming from. So sometimes you differ because your context of your life is magkaiba.
Thank you, Father. Would anyone like to add?
Dagdagan ko lang, sino dito nanood or nanonood ng Attack on Titan? Ayan. So, naalala niyo yung ano na yun, yung kwento na yun na, okay, dalawang mundo sila, di ba? Tapos nagigera sila, thinking that the other is evil. Parang ganun yun eh, na kung hindi mo tatawirin yung wall na yun or gigibain mo, yun yung sinasabi ni Father Bennett, to understand the context, then ganun talaga yung tingin natin. Pero pare-parehas lang naman ng adhikain, di ba? Ng gusto sa buhay. Parang, gusto mo kapag-aral, you want a better life for your family, di ba? You care, you want food on the table, diba? Parang ganun. So I think, in that sense, no, parang that's what Father Ben is also saying na, context is important, but also that openness to receive that different context is also important. So, yun.
Thank you. Hila? Doc Shaw?
Sa karanasan yung it's a question of attitude and target goal eh. When we talk about conversation, sometimes ang tanong kasi is what's the point of the conversation? Is it really to win over someone, the other person? Or is the point of conversation to seek clarity and understanding? Kaya ngayon sinasabi ni Hila na openness mahalaga eh. So engaging in conversation, honest, genuine conversation is really about creating that bridge rather than saying or proving the other as wrong and stressing that you're right. No? And that's why language can be a barrier initially. I agree. But like I said, when talk about language, it's not just about verbal. In fact, if we in our conversations with communities, I think what's the more important and the more impactful will be the nonverbals. How we dress up, how we our facial expressions, even the tone of our voice. I think those are the more important aspect of the language that we speak of.
When you go into a strange place, I go to Marawi, I go to Sulu, best things to be with the children, play with the children, get to know them. That will attract people to you because they also love that. They're not required with children. And once you begin to do that, you begin to develop a relationship with them, begin to achieve some level of friendship. And after that, you may still disagree, but you're not going to quarrel about it. That's the you become friends. You establish first a relationship of trust. And very often, the best way to establish a relationship of trust is to see you really playing with the children. That means you really care for the family.
I am Patrick Pardella. I am from 2AB Humanities. I wanted to ask a question because I heard, it's actually directed to Father Ben because I've heard your stories about your time in the university. And I wanted to ask, have you ever met, like, let's say people who really wanted to, let's say join the cause or to speak out, but they can't seem to do it because, let's say their situation is like if they try to speak out, it's like they're at the risk of like losing something. Let's say for example their parents told them not to speak out on anything because it could risk like their job, it could risk like how solidarity comes with a cost. And what can you say to those people who are like in those situations? They really want to speak out but they just can't do it.
That's not easy to answer because if you spoke about the Nazis, you'd be dead, no? So it's the context, it's not easy to answer your question because there are times certainly when you should not speak up. If you were a Jew in Nazi Germany, you should not speak up. You're dangerous. So, but there are contexts where maybe you can find a way, but I can only answer your question in very, very specific context. Because, yeah, you don't want your family to die because of you spoke up. Or even in the United States today, how much do you want to speak up against President Trump when you know that they're going to attack you and your family and your children? So you have to weigh these things. No?
Yeah. So I guess it's part of it is assessing the risk, so to speak. No, and it's very contextual, of course. No. So yes. So thank you, Patrick.
Thank you.
Okay. Do we have any other input or questions from our students or our guests on site? Yes, one last, sir. Please come forward. Kindly introduce yourself.
Hello, good evening po. I'm Emmanuel Borja. You can call me Eman. I'm from 2BS Management Engineering. I'm very eager to, due to NSTP, due to theology, due to all of these immersions, I feel very, very eager to try out to reach out to the communities kasi my personal mission was to, at least for people from all fields, including the marginalized, to speak out their own opinions, to participate in public discourse. However, as I've heard from you, that because of the internet, because of the things that are happening on and on, the crisis everywhere, I'm part of the people who feel demotivated, disillusioned to not speak up, and that I'm also quite introverted as well. So I would like to ask, aside from aside from the language barriers, aside from the different backgrounds I had, how could you give me some advice on how I'm able to speak more, try to do more than all of this, because I really, really want to break this type of thing that's been chaining me for so long. So
I think Doc Shaw said build relationships. I go a lot to the Muslim areas, Marawi, Maguindanao, Sulu, and they know I'm a priest, different religion, but they also know I'm a friend. So they simply welcome me as a friend. And we're good friends with each other. They greet me at Christmas and my birthday. I greet them at Eid al-Fitr, and so on. So there's nothing like friendship and relationship. And so if you are shy and introverted, try to go with a friend who is more extroverted, because somebody has to start a conversation. And if you're an introvert, you're not going to start a conversation. So go with a friend. Or find one. Kat will
make
show
friends
you.
here later. May mix up.
It's very important to understand the strengths and weaknesses of our temperament. And so, yeah, try to make a good friend who will go with you, and he'll carry the conversation, and then you just join in.
I guess I'd like to first, siguro like commend you on that mission that you have for yourself. And siguro to respond to your question, I think, jumping off of what Father Ben said in terms of finding a friend, there are other people who have, I'm pretty sure there are other people who share the same advocacy, who share the same mission as you. You can find those groups, or in fact, if not, you have OSCI, who shares that mission with you. And you find, there is a community that can help you start that off. It can help you start with how you want to, make those relationships, form those friendships with the communities that you want to interact with. So I think, yeah, that's where you can, that's one way that you can also start, finding that community. Here, OSCI, we are here. So yeah.
Thank you. It's actually finding companions, again, who will go with you to make more companions. Okay. So let's thank all our students who share their questions, their insights. And I'd like to request our reactors and our main speaker to stay in front. And I'd like to call on Doc Benji and Doc Leland and Miss Ophelie to just give some tokens of appreciation to our speaker and to our reactors.
May I just issue an invitation. DepEd and people I work with are trying to go in a big way to get children, to help children who cannot read. No, from May 8th to June 6th, we'll be doing a massive program in Region 9, the whole of Region 9. So, and the two leading it are actually Ateneans, Carmela Roxanne and Joanne Hernandez. They're both ASECs. And then next school year, we'll be doing this all over the country on Saturdays. So maybe OSCI might consider mobilizing an STP or other ways, and I'd be happy to connect you. We need everybody, because we'll like for the work in Region 9.
Amplify that invitation. Okay. So Ms. Ophelie, Doc Leland, and Doc Benji. All right.
Sige po. So we just would like to present our tokens and the certificate of appreciation. First to Father Bienvenido Nebres for his invaluable contribution as a resource person for OSCI at 50, Remembering the Past, Reimagining the Future, held in celebration of the 50th anniversary of the Office for Social Concern and Involvement, given this 8th day of April 2025 at Faber Hall 101, Ateneo de Manila University. And we also would like to present our tokens to and certificates to Doc Shaw, Ms. Hila, and Ms. Kat.
We have one group photo with our VIPs as well. So thank you. You can take your seats back at with the audience. Thank you. And so to close our program this evening, again, we'd like to call on the Director of OSCI, Ms. Ophelie Alzona Pornella. Palakpakan po natin si Ope.
Sorry, it's a bit over time, like 3 minutes, but thank you all for being here. So I just wish to close this evening by expressing my gratitude to Father Ben Nebres, Doc Shaw, Hila, Kat, and to all those who helped make this event possible, Dr. Benji Tolosa, Dr. Leland de la Cruz, for their unwavering support to OSCI, Ma'am Joy Salita, Ma'am Rina Simpas, the other AVPs from our cluster for being present here today, all the current OSCI staff informators, especially Syra Petalio, project head of these talks, and to all of you who have been part of OSCI's journey through the year, students, faculty partners, colleagues, administrators. Special thanks to Chris, of course, to my husband. When we were putting together this talk and our other activities to commemorate our 50 years, I'm sorry I did that. Anyway, we wanted to be able to look back and celebrate our journey and accomplishments and those of so many volunteers and formators who came before us. We also wanted to be able to reflect and see what the next years or maybe even 50 years would or should be like. And Father posed a very difficult question, no? But two things struck me today. The need to focus on relationships with our country and especially with the poor. And I think while, OSCI through our formation programs, are doing that, no? The deliberate design of Binhi, Punla, and Big Kiss shows the importance of building relationships and knowing the people in the communities, anchored in the belief that we cannot serve those who we do not know. And this is something that we continue to teach our students, and this is something that we'll continue to work on as an organization and as individuals, as formators. No? Father Ben also talked about pivoting and addressing specific needs and issues, and this continues to be a challenge that we face. How do we work better with GK? How do we work better with ACE and other social development institutions or our partners given our own mandate? How can we make use of ours, the students, and the university's strengths in responding to the cry of the poor? We've made headway in some of our programs and partnerships with the departments. Hila mentioned the DS program. DS students doing service for 1 year, some facilitating capability building training for our community partners, others working with the youth, the IPs, management students assisting the nanays in Quezon City to get grants for their small businesses, and so much more. So much more. I don't have time to mention all of these, no? But of course, we have a long way to go, a really long way to go. We continue to ask ourselves the difficult and challenging questions. And while we may not have all the answers to these questions, at least not yet, one thing that we know, and which I've mentioned earlier, OSCI remains steadfast in its commitment, as Doc Shaw said, to the mission. And that is to make a meaningful impact in society. We'll continue to form students to become persons for and with others. We'll continue to foster solidarity action, and we'll continue to do advocacy work. I'd like to end this last promise by borrowing the words of Dr. Marcus Mesher at the annual ADJCU Faculty Conversations Conference at Xavier University, which I hope can also serve as our closing prayer. In the spirit of persons for and with others, may we see ourselves as bridge builders, ambassadors of reconciliation and peacemakers, especially in the face of so many hurtful divisions and unequal inequalities. May we overcome the globalization of indifference by drawing near to others, doing our part to restore dignity, unmask racism, sexism, homophobia, and every form of discrimination, violence, and injustice, and build partnerships marked by mutual honesty and trust. May we work toward ever more inclusive solidarity and kinship. May we do all this united by love, justice, for the greater glory of God. Amen.
So thank you very much, Ms. Ofali. Okay. So with that, we'd like to thank again everyone for being here. Palakpakan niyo naman po ang isa't isa.